Thank you so much. I really want to just thank everybody who is attending, as you said, Nelson. And I know it's evening in some places, afternoon in other places, and it will just be good to get where people are calling from to attend this really important webinar on really about health, harmonized clinical trials, financing in Africa. And really, the theme today is about the $20 versus $150 dilemma towards harmonized clinical trial financing. As we know, across the continent, we see huge variations in the CRAs and the sites, their fees, and sometimes it can even be in the same study. So today with our panelists, which I'll introduce very soon, we'll really explore why this happens, what can be done about it, and how we can build a fairer, more transparent framework together. So in terms of the formatting, I'll start with the introduction, what I've done. There will be a panel discussion for about 35 to 45 minutes. And then we'll get to know the questions from the audience as well. And our panelists and myself together will try to share some light to the questions. And I therefore give the floor also to the Nairobi County Conference team to also give a preview of the conference. And I think from there, Nelson, you will tell us when to end. So in terms of today, we have, let me look at it again. We're supposed to have two panelists, including myself, and I think one is not yet there, but I want to say Mrs. Anne Gwangi, who is joining us here, really much. She's a managing director of, we're managing director of Africa Clinical Trials, and it really coming with a very strong experience as a clinical trial professional for over 15 years across several multiple therapeutic areas, and also more than 18 years in the pharmaceutical industry. She has a lot you can share with us today, like companies from Roche, from GSK, from Equivia. At the moment, she's located in Kenya, and is going to bring her global expertise to from the continent. And now she celebrates 9 years of impact with her organization, and her experience and dedication and will help us propel and bring inputs on this conversation that we're going to have today. I really want to also present Talu Kasungo. She has been really the lead behind making sure, together with the Nairobi City Council, to put this together. And I'm really happy that we are all going to share our inputs about this topic for today. We also were supposed to, I think she will be late a little bit. We have Selena Cesar Chavanes. She's the managing director of CCC & Co. She's a business leader, a government expert with extensive experience in organizational strategy and equity-focused health systems. As managing director, she brings strong expertise in sustainable research, financing, and exclusive partnerships. She has done this before on this topic. We've had some previous chats, and she will be able to share with us her expertise on this topic. And I really want to indulge the attendees to share also not only questions, but also share if you have some inputs to put in on the chat. So I think, Nelson, this is the introduction of the panelists. They are brief, but I'm happy to also open the floor for them if they have missed something key that they might be able to put on their mic and say something. I know, Kevin, you're also there from the team, and you'll also be able to give us some inputs on the preview on the conference. So I declare the webinar open.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandy, for your introduction. And nothing else to cover. Thank you for a very summarized view of my experience. I'm looking forward to this discussion. And I believe that we can impart some wisdom given our vast experience.
Thank you so much, Anne. I think I will kick off if there's nothing else to say from. I'll kick off with the first question, Anne, and really want to understand what is driving this wide variation in the CRA and site fees across Africa. Is it a market force? Are there market forces behind this? Is this just a lack of benchmark and a structure to it? Or from your experience, is there something you think that is something deeper than we should understand here? Maybe I'll start with that first question for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So a little bit about my experience. As you've mentioned, I have worked in the industry for coming up to 20 years now. And when I started my career, the pharmaceutical industry was expanding into Eastern Europe. At that time, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic were outside of the EU. So when the transition from Western Europe moved into Eastern Europe, we were going into those countries looking for the participants, the patients, the doctors, the PIs to work with. And in most cases, this is, as I mentioned, over 20 years ago, these were very low resource centers. They were hospitals, they were former Soviet countries. So you can imagine the resource constraints were significant, not unlike where we are today in Africa. So the drive then for the pharmaceutical industry was cheaper. It was to go to locations where there was cheaper resource, there were more participants, there were participants that didn't have the exposure to the medicines that the pharmaceutical companies were trying to test out. So treatment naive participants where you can recruit quickly and move your study forward. So those were the drivers then moving the industry from Western Europe into Eastern Europe. Over the last 20 years, obviously the industry has evolved, and you cannot perform clinical trials without including Poland, without including countries that now are powerhouses in the clinical trial industry. So you see now the switch is moving to Africa, to places again that look as those countries did then. There are low resource settings. So again, the same drivers are what is leading research, particularly within the pharmaceutical industry, within the biotechs, coming this way. They're looking for low resource settings. They're looking for cheap labor. They're looking for lots of participants that can be recruited quickly. As a part of that, we cannot compete at the same prices as they have in Western Europe, in the US. Those are not the drivers that they're looking for when they come to Africa. So yes, market influence has a big part to play in that. Additionally, we are looking at a lack of benchmarking. We don't, again, if you look at the pharmaceutical industry, the way they go into sites and budget a site at a site level is based on benchmarks. They have tools that they will use that will ensure that we have participants' fees that are associated with the cost expenses per country. So each country has an expense for ECG, has an expense for informed consent, has an expense that is directly associated to that country for a blood draw. That is what they use to create the budgets. Now, if you're coming to countries that do not have that oversight, they do not have that experience, what are you benchmarking against? You have to start somewhere. And each clinical trial then starts and begins from a very low base because they're expecting us to have cheap labor. They're expecting things to be cheaper here. The other thing that drives cost is we're competing with countries like India. India resource, the prices are cheap. So if they're going to benchmark us, they're going to look at countries like India, which again, we cannot compete with that because the prices in India tend to be astronomically low. So these are the challenges that we're facing as we develop the industry, as we start pricing ourselves, pricing our resource, pricing our experience and our skills. This is, I think, what we have to bear in mind.
Thank you so much for that. That is really very rich for what you've just described. And I think it's quite right to know that cheap labor, one of the key drivers, and therefore it's kind of country specific. And in some of my experience as well, when there's a multi-country or a multi-site trial, you see that's where you really now see the big difference between those countries. And where I'm giving you an example now, why we say $20, $150. It came from a study where a CRA will be costing its services for $20 in one country, and another country, and the same CRA is costing its services for $150. But they are doing the same work. They're in the same category. And it just pushes us to say that, yes, there are country specifics, but maybe there is somewhere, if somewhere we need to harmonize, comes from harmonization. I think, for example, just from your words too, India is a billion and maybe, I don't know, 400 or 500 million people, almost the same like Africa, right? Maybe 1 billion, 300 people now. So I think there is probably value in these drivers, and maybe we can, and most of them are coming from the sponsor perspective. This is what the causes of it we're expecting, and we have this expectation. There may be also Africans and CRL experts within the continent can also start saying that we have some, we know your expectation, but at least these are the areas within which we expect you to learn in terms of costing. Same thing with the sites, and even cause some competition between the sites. The site will cost the project for maybe $1 million. Another site is coming with the same project with 3 million, and the sponsors like, okay, So I thank you so much for raising that, and I think somebody just corrected us from the chat. India is 1.6 billion people now, and but again, I really want to think that there is so much similarities. If Africa now is coming to Africa, we need to look for what works for us and having that conversation with the sponsors. So thank you so much for that. And I think he asks now the question. So do we need some kind of a reference benchmark or a framework for our fees? What are your thoughts around that?
Um, so I think as we do more and more clinical trials, so again, another statistic that I think is important to understand, from the global clinical trials that are run, only 3% of global clinical trials are run in Africa. And this is in Africa on Africans. So we still account for a very small percentage of clinical trials that are being operated here. So the data pool from which to pull and benchmark is still very small. So to understand the tools that the CROs use, that the sponsors will use, we have to influence that to ensure that the data that they need is being captured. Often, obviously, this is captured by the number of trials that are run or conducted in countries. As you've mentioned, there will be country variations. There are countries in Africa that, even with that 3%, 4%, are participating the majority of the clinical trials. We know countries like South Africa, of course, in sub-Saharan Africa, in North Africa, Egypt is the second country that performs the large number of clinical trials. Then comes Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, and these are becoming increasingly fewer. So that's where the data sources are coming from. So if, for example, then you have a study that's being run in Gabon, a country that hasn't had a lot of clinical trials, this is where you'll get that disparity. There isn't any data to benchmark that the resource that you're going to send there. So it's all well and good to say that we need to set a benchmark, but the CROs, the companies already have a tool that does that. I think realistically, it will be very hard for us to then come in and influence that tool. That tool is data driven. So it will be quite hard for us to manipulate that. However, the role of a CRO, a local based CRO, is to then discuss with the sponsor. I know this is what your tool says, this is what the price for XYZ is, but this is the information on the ground. This is the reality on the ground. So this is why we encourage international CROs, international pharmaceutical companies to collaborate with local CROs that have that on the ground information. And then that is how we can influence payments from a site perspective, from a CRA perspective, to match, again, some sort of, or have some sort of equity in the people that are doing the same work in different regions, different countries.
Thank you so much for that. It really just shows that the data or what is coming from is sponsor driven. But of course, there is still a way out for us to like negotiate. And we also know there is still also some competition between global CROs that have a foot in Africa and the local African CROs. They also have their fight.
Indeed.
Maybe it's not a conversation for today. It's like who use, and the thing is, they all use the CRAs. The CRAs, the Clinical Research Associated in
Same
Africa,
people.
the same
Mm-hmm.
people, and in one trial, this person is earning this much because it's coming from the sponsor, and
Yep.
another trial, this person is earning this much because it's coming from a local CRO or African CRO. I think that kind of a conversation should be held, but how?
Mm.
I think my question is now, would it just be individual project based, or this has to be somewhere where that conversation should be held? Like, okay, we are collaborating, you are bringing in this study.
Yes.
This is the reality on the ground. The CRAs don't feel fair about what the price they are going to make. And even the CRAs feel that is a CRO that's eating all the money, if I use the lad
There might
language.
there might be some truth to that. Because a CRO is going to price their resource at a competitive rate. I again, depending on the experience of the CRO, I'm sure that they're going to price themselves, if not on par as majority of the CROs, large CROs, then they'll place themselves just beneath that. So if I find it staggering that there will be somebody that will approach a CRA and tell them, I'll give you $20. I think that to me is something that is unconscionable. They're not getting $20. They are getting significantly more than that. So I think there's a fair or there's an element of fairness that needs to come in. And maybe it's an element of education. If a CRA knows this is the benchmark, it might not get you there, but it will maybe take you off $20 and give you something more substantial.
Yeah, and so probably some element of transparency to show, and maybe that's also far-fetched. Most CRAs don't need to, some of them don't even see the budget of the project, yeah, and
That's true.
so
Yeah, they wait.
yeah, they don't even see it. Yeah, and yeah, not to talk of seeing what the other person for the other country is even earning. They don't even discuss that. And I think there's an element to fairness, which you have just brought up, and competitiveness. We are dealing with, I think our all main aim, together with our institution, is to have a stronger, robust ecosystem, clinical trial or clinical research ecosystem in Africa. What does that mean is that we need to have many more CRAs than what we have, many more professionals in the field, uh, and even to encourage more to get into to this area of research. Most are clinicians, so just they are being used for studies, and there's no link between how do you become a CRA. So somehow, if we want to really boost and maybe in the near future compare with India. And India, there's also an element of a critical mass of clinical researchers there. That's probably why they might even bring their prices that low. So I think the way we are going with this and how important this topic is can also mean that we can, create some element of encouraging experts to get into this very important area. So maybe questions now come up is how can we then strike that balance between fairness and flexibility? Do you, from your experience, is it somehow our CROs need to be a little more transparent, or is it how do you think we can make that balance?
Before I speak about that, I wanted to touch on the future of monitoring, the future of CRAs. I think we need to be cognizant that I think the role is going to change with the rise of AI, with the rise of e-source, with the rise of machine learning. A lot of these data will be captured directly on eSource and transferred straight to the ECRF. So the monitoring role, as it looks today, I think is going to change. There won't be that same need to go to the site, look through patient notes, compare that, again, as we've known, source data verification. With that, I think there's going to be a shift to require fewer CRAs. Not to say that this role is going to go entirely, but I think what will happen is a lot of these data review, data verification is going to be centralized. So done remotely, centralized by a machine. Therefore, the role of the CRA then becomes something about relationships, relationship management, going to the site, ensuring that training is there, ensuring that the documents have been submitted. So the role then changes. The CRA is not sitting there doing SDV for 3-4 days. So that means that you'll need few of that. So if we are going to be encouraging people to come into the industry, I think we need to arm them and educate them as to where the future is going. How can you then become a better researcher? We're not going to go to those traditional methods. And for some time, yes, there will be that overlap. Hybrid, you'll still have that traditional overlap. But I think there is going to be a reduction coming. So we need to encourage them to do other things than just focus on that CRA role.
Definitely. I really like that, and I think most of the attendees that are listening to us now will really start taking AI very seriously. And some might also share that AI is coming to take their jobs. But I think from what you just explained is that there's a twist what the type of job would be. It's not going to,
Exactly.
so it's still not taking the jobs, but they have to adapt and be flexible in the industry. I really like the idea of relationship management. That's really a strong part of what I do, what we do in Thrift Alliance. It's really making sure that we have very strong stakeholder engagements and relationships with the sites, with our partners, stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, we are running trials in communities. We are running trials in cities. We are running trials with people. So no matter which tool you use tomorrow, definitely you have to have a relationship with the person that's involved in the clinical trial. And most studies, one of the complaints that come from them is like, oh, you just come here and collect data and you go away, or you come here at the site, you just check our books and you leave. So I think that's a good point to put it out there that there's that element of maybe tomorrow to start training them. Do you still get me? I'm getting a signal. Okay.
I can hear you still.
Okay, I thought I got a signal that my internet was not stable. Okay, so great. I think you have just sent out an element of an opportunity also for training, and around what kind of training we need to give our CRAs now to be better equipped for the future. And I think that's very important. If we really want to make importance in this industry, we need to first someone understand what AI is, what kind of tools. And that even brings me, you talk about e-source. E-source, how many tools of e-source software are being developed by Africans themselves? There are not many,
Yes.
as
Yeah.
compared to most of those e-source will be coming up from different countries and coming into Africa for us to use. So maybe CRS to start thinking, I've been doing this, they will say, CRS to start thinking, I've been doing this remote monitoring for this long, I've been doing site monitoring for this long. How can there be a tool by AI, So I think that raises the question and an opportunity for us to be better equipped for the future. If not, we'll still be there and getting parachute set ESOS and other for us to use. But there are others that are very nice, but I think it opens a lot of opportunities here on that note. Yeah. So yeah, I was talking about if you could hear what we just I'm talking now, the attendees, we're talking about some capacity building opportunities which you raised and some long-term in the future. How do we make sure we really adapt ourselves? But I'll go back to maybe what you think should be a part of this AI. What do you think should be coming back on this fees topic that we raised? How do we use this opportunity to do more capacity building or in our African ecosystem? Do you have any
Mm.
thoughts around it?
I think we have an opportunity here. Everybody globally is in the same boat. Everybody's trying to figure out how this AI, how machine learning is going to transform the industry. Nobody has an advantage in this. And I think this is where, as Africans, and particularly the adoption, we know that Africans have a very quick adoption to new technology. And I mean, we can mention M-Pesa. Being one of those adoptions which has not been seen anywhere else and was before anywhere in Europe. And they've been trying to catch up to that electronic money transfer. So it's a tricky one because nobody knows where this is going, how this is going to evolve. This is the opportunity to think wide, think large, and try things, move quickly. Yeah. So I don't have anything specific at this point, and I don't know if anybody else on the panel has any ideas or has come across anything that is quite interesting.
Yeah, the panel is open. Emmanuel, Talu, Omondi, any thoughts around that topic of AI and the future of clinical trials ecosystem in Africa? The floor is open. Let me give some time for Anne to breathe. Anyone? Yeah, maybe and maybe just to tie it also with the first webinar we had, which was around digitalization. Creo and partners, they came on board to really give us a good what's their platforms and how can it enhance making clinical trials more by use of e-source, by use of other tools. But that's where we are going in the continent, digitalization, as you rightly said it, to be able to use data. You spoke about the last one of the points, what data pool to use on benchmark and all that. So data is very important in this ecosystem as well. And maybe that's where we'll have the breakthroughs. I would say the people want to put a little bit of more interest. It's not as you say, not the traditional way of going to and study. If you want to get into this ecosystem, there's more than just getting the knowledge. the technical scientific knowledge of doing this, but also looking at how can I adapt with the tools, we're using the right tools to make sure this happens. So I think that's where we are going. And if we really want to strengthen our ecosystem, we should not avoid AI, let's do something about it. I don't know if I can, just to get you to breathe a little bit. There's a question online. Could you kindly sum up on CROs? Could you kindly sum up on CROs? That's the first one. It's really not clear too much. How is data protection going to be preserved? Asking out of curiosity. How is data protection going to be preserved? Definitely, yeah, that's probably, I'll hear from you, Anne, before I open the floor for any other point. But I think, yeah, please.
Mm. Yeah, so data protection is obviously going to be key for the future. And as you've mentioned, a lot of these e-source companies that we're and tools that we're using are external to Africa. So we are giving away data that is critical to our health systems, our health ecosystems. We need to be ensuring that we're safeguarding the data that we're collecting. The good thing is there are a lot of data protection laws already in place. Kenya already has a very live and robust data protection law that ensures that the data that's being captured is not being misused or used outside of the confines of the data that's been collected. So that's already very clear. But there are large pools of data that are sitting in places that could be utilized again by these machine learning programs, by AI, by large language models that we could utilize to spring forward the research that we're doing. Sometimes a lot of, and this goes back to the capacity building, this goes back to sustainability. Some clinical trials may not need to be performed because the data is already there. We just don't know where it is or how it's sat. It's not been reviewed. So this is where we can now go back and look at how to pull that data, aggregate that data, and utilize it for research. We don't have to run some of these trials over and over again. The data is there.
Definitely.
So I think that's where, as a future for Africa, we have a lot of data we've collected. Again, research is not new to us. We've been doing this for many years. So how do we utilize what we already have? How can we make sure that we can leapfrog again the things that we already have this stuff. So we need to ensure that we can utilize this.
Definitely. That's great point there. And as you cited, a couple of, even in South Africa, they're always making sure their data protection laws are put in place. I wish we want to be like, or the continent will take it very strongly and very personally, like, like other regions, other continents are really making sure that their data, because that's where the whole information is based.
Mm-hmm.
I feel maybe that's personal here, but sometimes I think that these trials and the data we share outside Africa, they are just like any other goods that we do. We always like
Exactly.
sharing raw materials. We share raw materials and we don't process them. To come out
That's
from
it.
what is already existing in our data, different databases in different other continents, some of them are not even digitalized, some of them are still on paper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking of
Mm-hmm.
many medical hospitals, medical centers and hospitals. You go there, they have a lot of data that's been, put into, they're still in paper-based form. Some countries are really getting more stronger in the electronic medical records, but there's still many countries that are still just lying around, allowing that data, lying there, not making use of it. And even that question you just talked about, when a sponsor or a CRO comes in to say, I want to study this, who even asks that, hey, wait, let's check whether we have this data first? Most of the time, I will say they don't even think about that. You don't even like, okay, we already have some data here. Instead of doing this trial, equip, or maybe let's put hands together, clean our data that's existing and see what's already there before we do another trial. Most of the time, that question is not even being asked. And when we talk of capacity building in most of these centers and even in our hospitals, data infrastructure, most of the time doesn't even come into the picture, So I think there's what you just raised. There's a lot of very important points, key lessons for us, and many opportunities for our panel, for our attendees to start going back into their different institutions. How can we look at what we have already have? How can we build that up and be able to use what we have? The last one I'll raise is very few local investigator-initiated trials. That's another point, because
Yes,
nobody takes the time to go into that database. What is there?
yes,
What do we see it?
yes.
And how can we get more questions to dig in more and then look for funding? Almost of the time we expect that the proposal protocol comes from outside, then a
That's
trial is
right.
done. We don't look. So that
Mm.
I think there's just a whole lot of pack what you just said here, and a lot of opportunities for our audience to look into, going back into what really exists. And that's an opportunity for capacity building, training. Use the AI, look at what you have, and how do you build your skills on data science, which we now hear everybody was looking for data scientists. Every institution is a data scientist to look into all these models to look into. So thank you so much. And I think data protection is key on all this. I will come back to some of the questions of the audience, but maybe just to go ahead in some of the questions we have for you, our panelists. Now that we all have seen that there's a whole lot that could be done. You talked about how it's going to be challenging to do benchmarking, but at least we can negotiate some framework. The data pool it's low, it's small for us to really do some clear benchmarking, but we see that there's a lot of differences in capacity in the different countries when we go country by country. There's an opportunity to be fair in terms of our CROs and even the sponsors when they come. I think there's some obligation for them to be more transparent and fair with our CRAs in a way to uh, encourage them. And those who are not already in the field, but encourage them that at least it's fair that what I'm receiving is what I should be receiving. And it also encourages me to work harder to move to the next level that I can increase. I can have a higher salary or higher fee. So those are some of the things that we have spoken here today, and I think there is need to continue digging deep, and so my next question is then, from your experience, who then, on how then can we constitute the development of a framework or a development of even a conversation on what benchmark. What do you think about that? It should be on a continental level. Should it be on a continental level? Should it be on a country level? Could it be on a regional level? And who are those partners that we can bring up on board to have that kind of an inclusive and transparent conversation? A long question, but just to have your thoughts around there.
Um, that is a really challenging discussion. So a lot of these fees have been structured on what they call fair market value. Um, that being constructed on the experience, on the education, on the years that these patients know, sites or CRAs have been working in. That is what fair market value tends to be categorized in. Now, if we have countries within Africa, so forget global, we have countries within Africa that participate more in clinical trials. We therefore have resources in these countries that mean that the CRAs at the sites in these countries have more experience in clinical trials. So the data that we're getting from the sites, the quality of work that we're getting is higher than new sites coming in. This is why it's hard to benchmark, because you cannot compare the more experienced versus those that don't have that same experience. It won't, again, that won't be fair either. So I think it's hard to say that we can benchmark on regions, on countries. I think maybe we need to have this. So, for example, the WHO have the maturity levels of regulatory systems. I think you're aware of those. You have your maturity level 1, 2, 3, 4. So maybe that's how we benchmark a country. What is your maturity level in clinical trials? What sort of experience does a site have? Maybe it even goes to a site level. And then you can benchmark for a mature site. This is the benchmark for a less mature site. And then it also shows progression. This is where you can get to. The more you participate, the more you get experience. Maybe that's how we make sure that there's parity, not just with experience, but also encouraging others to come on board and continue to grow.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think that is really packed there. Fairness can be on the lower side and fairness can be on the upper side. So it gets me thinking that definitely there might be some level of a range somewhere, a range to say, okay, based on and also criteria, level of criteria, therefore, right? You say, okay, everybody gets in there and the criteria puts you on a level where, okay, you, based on this, that, this is what you earn.
Exactly.
This can be on a personal level as a CRA, clinical research
Yes.
associate. So, okay, based on my experience and all that, as a junior CRA, of course, or maybe a mid CRA or a senior CRA, based on my own experience, maybe it's fair to give me this amount. So that level of
Exactly.
fairness is it's there, coming up on that. And also it can also be as a site level, a site to say, okay, I've done this number of trials, just comparing Kemri with like Kemri in Kenya, you can,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to call names, but
Yeah.
you definitely a site that's running 1,000 trials a year cannot be compared with a trial that a site that's doing
Exactly.
100 trials a year, right?
Exactly.
They
Exactly.
definitely,
Yeah.
when a sponsor is going there, you know that, okay, I'm dealing with these people.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe also it shows that it's kind of a two-way thing. The site will say, okay, we are at this level of maturity. So when you're coming to
That's
us,
right.
this is what we can
Yeah.
negotiate on, And so as a site level, as a country level too, it's an ecosystem. Running trials is an
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem. You deal with so many vendors, you deal with so many stakeholders, so many experience, as you talked about maturity level of the regulatory bodies, even the clinical, even the ethics boards, might also
Mm-hmm.
come into say, okay, this is how strong we are. So even on a country level too, you're right, that we can have some criteria to say, okay, this is what regional level now, it gets a little bit complex. How do you get an average, right? East
Mm-hmm.
Africa
Mm-hmm.
community or East Africa
Yes.
community, how do you get an average in East Africa? It's okay, when you're going to Kenya, this is what you get. Maybe we can also get a
Mm-hmm.
range. When you go to Uganda, this is what you get averagely. So I think there is so much there, and it even opens the floor for people or sites or institutions or the country to grow. This is where we are now. We want
Mm-hmm.
to get to this point. So I think, the question now comes with how do we initiate those conversations at those
Mm-hmm.
different levels? But maybe that's not
Exactly.
the point of today, but maybe it will be our last question to say, okay, how do we take it from here to the next
Mm-hmm.
level, this conversation? There's so much we have talked about. Maybe that becomes a workshop, maybe that becomes another webinar, but there's just a whole lot we have spoken here. I think that was my last question for me myself. If I look at it, let me go through quickly. Yeah, I think that's some of the practical, but maybe that last one for you is, yeah, how do we move from here based on your experience? I know you're based in East Africa, right? So how do you, if it comes up now, we say, okay, now we should, both our institutions and our partners here and even the Nairobi City Council. Let me take the example of the Nairobi City Council government to say, okay, in Nairobi County, we want to have a benchmark or have a framework or a guide to say, okay, we want to also encourage more CRAs to come out from the Nairobi City government. How can that be done? You know, what kind of criteria we need to put in place if that's been asked, if there's a need and a will. Yeah, there's a lot packed in there, but what may be the next step for you? Just let me stop there. Let me not go further, but maybe what would be a next step for you if you want to rally some folks to really come down and have this and talk on this topic?
Um, I think it's good to understand where we are as a country, as a continent, in terms of research. So the majority of research that has been carried out has been within the infectious disease space. But again, you will know that as the countries mature, they get more affluent, middle class, we're seeing a huge rise in non-communicable diseases. We're seeing a rise in mortality that is going to be on par, communicable and non-communicable. So we're facing this double burden. So when it comes to the research that we're doing, I think we need to be able to pivot away from the typical work that we've done in the past, and which may not have been as of interest to the West, as they don't suffer from a lot of these non-communicable diseases, or communicable diseases, as it were. We now have a market that fits with the demographic of Western Europe, of America, so the same compounds that they are working on need to be here. We need to be using and making sure that the compounds that are being developed for these non-communicable diseases that we suffer as well, the diabetes, the chronic hypertension, the oncology medicines, they work within our context. As you might know, obviously with oncology, there are very advanced medicines and monoclonal antibodies and all of this stuff, where you do not see a huge percentage of Africans in Africa participating in these trials. We have these biosimilars, we have all of these medications that are very new to the industry, and we're not in them. We're not in that research. Our data is not present. So when we then start taking these medicines, when we can afford them, will they work the same way? We don't know. So we need to expand our thought into what type of work we want to do. I know you mentioned previously the investigator-led trials. This is where we need to be going. This is what we need to be thinking. What is our population? What does it need? Where is the research required? Let's not wait for others to dictate to us what research we should be doing. Let us lead that from the front. Based on our needs, as on the ground, we know what it is that we need. So that's the challenge that I want to set out. Yes, we still have a huge burden with HIV, malaria, TB. Yes, we have that. But there's this other growing thing that we need to be aware of. And I don't know if we're doing enough about that.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that's not only a challenge, but a call to action. You know, a call to action.
Yeah.
We still, not only that, we don't get to participate in those trials for NCDs, for cancers, gene therapy. One day I took my time to say, okay, let me look at any gene therapy trial that has occurred in the
Mm-hmm.
continent. It was difficult to
Mm-hmm.
find one. And I'm asking myself, so we don't have, so for us now, when there's a particular cancer, it's like a
Right.
death warrant, a death, because there are certain of those that only treat some specific, um,
Mutations.
treat some specific
Yeah.
cancers that we don't participate. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So I totally agree with you. We need to do a lot in the continent. And I think one of the key messages you've just mentioned is that we shouldn't be following and the others are leading on issues that concern us in this continent. I also add on to that challenge that we need to wake up. If not, as I said, we'll still be just providing raw materials, providing our data for people to use and developing. You even said it that even the providing our raw material is still very small globally. It's about 2 to 3% of trials that are occurring in the continent. So we need to wake up. The other aspect is investment, local investment into our R&D ecosystem. Clinical trials is part of the clinical trials ecosystem, and it's an investment. I've talked a long time on how building stronger ecosystem on clinical trials leads to economic development, more jobs, more opportunities for the things, treatment for the things that kill us, and more even diagnosis. So I think, just to add on to your point, there's just a whole lot packed there which we have looked into. If you don't mind, I will go to the questions, the remaining question of the audience. I see about 10 of them. Yeah. How can we safeguard data while using AI device or app whose developed is not from within Africa? I think that's kind of linked up with the data protection we're talking about. So safeguarding data using AI, especially now that we are now on this era of AI. Do you have any thoughts around that? But I think we have scratched it a little bit before.
Yeah, I think we did touch on this. And again, it goes also to that point of we're all globally in the same position. We don't know where AI is going. We don't know where machine learning, large language models are going. But if we do not play a part in this, then our data is also not, we're not being fed in there. So when you get that data is not being collated, it's not being reviewed, it's not being used or utilized. Because I know that the data is there, either in paper or siloed in an institution that is not widely available. We need a way to make sure that we are seeing the trends, and then we can work on that preventative approach. We need to know what's happening so that we can work on how to prevent them.
Definitely, we do need that. It just pulls us back. We need to go back to our data, and we can eventually know what works and what doesn't work to advise those who come and want to work with us. Okay, thank you for that. The another question from Mary: how can we ensure interoperability among African regions to mitigate against inequity and inequality to the AI-related benefits or risks, and actual health problems? How can we ensure, making sure African regions work together on this? I think this will need to come from the higher up with our regions as well. How do you bring them all on one table to have these discussions? But maybe you have some thoughts there, but I think that we need to have to influence them to come together and be able to talk on this matter at a really higher level, continental level. The next question from Nelly: how will we go about managing an overflow of AI tools and digital systems? Is there a strategy in place we borrow to navigate clinical trials run by robots against human loss of jobs? I think we just talked about it, but I would like to hear your thoughts. We talked about how we are switching. We make sure we understand the tools, but also switch to, that we are not losing our jobs to AI, but it's just a change of jobs. But maybe if you have something to answer to give you.
Yeah, it's just about adaptability. I think we need to shy away from that thought that, AI is coming for our jobs. I don't think we're at a place where we can do without humans. As we've mentioned, there's still a lot to be done in terms of relationship building, in terms of that interaction, even from a point of data gathering. There's still a human connection that is required. So I don't think that the risk of clinical trials run by robots is anywhere close to coming into fruition.
A question from Tirune: do we have enough local CROs in Africa? What is their role?
I think we touched on this as well. The role
Definitely
is to translate and contextualize the African experience, the African landscape. To a large extent, we are global. So a lot of things work in the same way, but there will be nuances. There will be contextualization that is required by a local CRO to translate to a global CRO, to a global pharma. And even if it's not a local CROs, a lot of these international CROs have local offices and local staff, and that is their role, to contextualize and provide the nuance that's required to make clinical trials successful.
Yeah. I think the next question is not even a question. Is they say it's high time we embrace AI, just what you said. Yeah, we all have to embrace it. It's coming there. The dot-com era was there. Everybody that did not take internet into consideration, we know how it ended. So now is the AI, we all have to. It brings value and we all have to embrace it, definitely. Topic around pharmacokinetics in Africa, blood sample shipping. That's another very big topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe you can shed more light to that.
Yes, yes. So I think this is one of those things, as you were mentioning, about data that needs to remain in-house. And there are countries that do not allow for samples to be shipped outside to be analyzed. For example, in Zambia, if you want to conduct a clinical trial that does not have the analysis capability in country, they will require you to send their scientists or your scientists from whichever country you are to them and educate the scientists, knowledge transfer, whatever it is that analytical experience is required. So this is why you'll see countries like Zambia that are really competitive today in the clinical trial space because they have made sure that their people are trained, their people have the latest knowledge and technologies that will enable them to participate in the global clinical trials. So that again is, of course, at a government level. We do have, we need
Yeah.
to ensure that our governments are taking that seriously and are ensuring that we are protected because our scientists have been trained in the latest and analytical processes and skills. Of course, there are commercial labs that have come up. Kenya has quite a number of commercial labs that can do a lot of PK work. So it's not always necessary to ship outside, but if you're participating in a global clinical trial, they will have central labs. So it's not a case or it's not a function that we cannot do the analysis locally, but it's a function of this is a global trial. There'll be countries and sites from all around the world that are shipping samples to a central lab. Fair enough, the central lab is not always in Kenya, but there will be central labs in South Africa. There's some here too, but it's not always the case. So we do have the capacity, we do have the skills and the knowledge set, but there's more that can be done.
Thank you so much. Yeah. From Zipporah, any plan for this in future? Any country or any county? Okay, so any county that has started it prepare for benchmark, or maybe you have any information. But when I looked, when I raised this topic, even a country level, it's still challenging. I don't find any data on benchmarking in terms of when it comes to site fees. As you have said, you have given the challenges it would take for us to even have to discuss this. But I think we have all come to a point that is now important to have that conversation. The fair market value system used by sponsors doesn't just be a copy and paste, or this is what it is, but it still opens the door for countries or counties to say, okay, this is what we think we are, at what level we are, and we can be able to negotiate the ranges with some clear criteria in place to judge and also to encourage our citizens or our population to get into this industry. We really need a critical mass of clinical research, clinical trial professionals, and many clinical researchers in the continent. So one way or the other, any county, any country, any region, the whole of Africa needs to encourage more experts in this area to have a stronger, robust ecosystem. I think that's, but maybe you have some final words to add on if there's what you think the future might be. I think the last question, data, we have talked about safeguarding, maybe, so that's our last question from the audience.
No, nothing else to add. We are at the cusp of a revolution. Things are changing, and we can participate in this. We shouldn't rule ourselves out. We should be active. We should be loud. We should insist that we are on the table. We're at the table. We're seated there, and we're being listened to, and we're actively participating in what the future holds. Otherwise, once again, we will be left behind. This is an opportunity to equalize, and we should grab that with both hands.
Definitely. I think in terms of summary of all what we have said is that Africa or countries need a structure. We need some framework to do this. And we are now in the Nairobi County. Maybe that's where it's going to start to have some discussions around there. Yeah, so I think we have to take these discussions a little bit further and find ways to put it on the table. So thank you so much, Anne. Thank you so much for all you've shared with us, with the audience today. I'll give back the floor to Nelson. Nelson, we really have to thank Dr. Anne Wangi for giving us her all here. And I, for one, am very optimistic that this conversation will not end here. We still need to do something. We have identified a lot of gaps and call for action and challenges.
And opportunities.
And opportunities, definitely. So something needs to be done. So Nelson,
thank you very much, Dr. Henshaw. I really enjoyed this. I think, as you've mentioned, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. So this is where I think with this platform, with this sort of forum, we can start setting those conversations. It's important to ensure that we have these discussions out loud and out in the open space. Transparency.
Definitely. Over to you, Nelson. I might not hear you. Maybe you are speaking on mute. Talu, are you there?
Thank you,
yes. Yes, hi.
It was really an interesting.
Hi, guys. I'm here.
Hi, Talu. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
We're not hearing Nelson.
So what's the question?
I think we've lost.
Yeah. Yeah, no, my connection is quite poor and it's cutting in and out.
Okay. Nelson, we lost you. Let me put on my camera.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Apologies. I had a bit of a technical hitch, but I am back now. As I was saying, thank you so much for the interesting conversation today. I can say that I have learned a lot. And to our participants, thank you for staying with us in this engaging conversation. We do hope that we can have you back on this platform to continue this conversation. And to our participant, if you would like to participate or follow more on these conversations, we'll be having more of this at the second Nairobi Health Scientific Conference. We'll be having the topics I am moving, the slides I am moving through the screens. You can see that we'll be having experts and professionals coming to speak in these spaces on a wide array of topics. And you are welcome to come and register to attend this conference. As you can see, it will be taking place at the Grand Argyle Hotel. That is from Wednesday 5th to Friday 7th. And you are welcome to register. You can register on the Nairobi County website to attend for this scientific conference. And not to forget that we will be having a national sensitization webinar coming up on Wednesday night, and this will be on the labor care guide, and this is brought to you by the Ministry of Health. So kindly do join us. Tell a friend, tell a colleague to tell a friend, invite invite your friends as well to this interesting conversation and rollout that will be done on Wednesday. Thank you so much for being with us, and also an extra thank you to our panelists for today. Thank you to Nairobi County for this pre-conference webinar, and we look to see you for those events. Good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening.